Okay, this is another video on using the RPM from Quintessential Universal Building Device. This video is relevant if you use the device for both 3D printing and CNC milling. So I'm going to launch Repeater Host. And I can see from the display, it's kind of a two-dimensional display here that it's configured as a CNC mill right now. So what I'm going to want to do is connect to the printer. And once it's connected, from the other videos, I showed how to save the EEPROM settings off to config files. So what I'm going to do, and then you should get into this habit, is every time you connect, if you're using it as a mill, come into the firmware and EEPROM configuration and come down and click on import EEPROM data. And from the previous videos, we saved these two files. We saved RPM mill and RPM printer. So if you're using it as a mill, come in and import the mill EEPROM settings. And really what this does is helps if I select things right. What this does is it makes sure that your accelerations are tuned down a little bit for milling. With milling, you don't want to have the same acceleration as you do with 3D printing because you're moving a much more massive head when you have the spindle attached. So you can import that and say OK. Now, if you were going to come in here to do 3D printing, I'm going to exit and I'll come back in and we'll go through the process of making sure things are set up for 3D printing. So we'll launch Repeater Host again. And from the previous videos, we set up a second configuration in here. We've got it set as RPM mill right now. I'm going to pull up the RPM 3D printer configuration. And what this is doing is setting Repeater Host with all the information that it needs for 3D printing. One of the biggest changes in here is that it's set to classic printer. So I'm going to make that change. I'm going to come and connect to the RPM again. And once I'm connected, I'm going to come into Config and go to the EEPROM configuration. And it was configured as a CNC mill, so you'll notice that the three accelerations right here are set at 50. For 3D printing, I want to have some different settings. And from the previous videos, we saved off the two config files. So I'm going to load the EEPROM settings in here for the 3D printing. And if we do that, you'll see that the accelerations are now set back to 100, 175. So click on OK. And now you'll notice that the display changed. We set it to 3D printer. Now you're good for 3D printing. I would get into the habit of always loading the EEPROM file every time you come in to use the device. Don't care if you think you have it set up for CNC milling or whatnot. Just come in and load the EEPROM for what you're going to be doing each time. If you use the CNC EEPROM when you're 3D printing, there won't be any issues with it. You'll just be printing slower. I like to kick them back up to the 100, 175 so I get better print speeds. But if you use the printing configs when you are trying to do CNC milling, you're going to run into issues because you're moving a heck of a lot more mass, and you're going to be over-torquing the motors trying to accelerate that much mass that quickly. So the biggest thing to take away from this video is always make sure that you have the appropriate EEPROM settings in there for CNC milling or printing. Just make it force of habit.